The next guest is Donatella Cusma, who is co-founder and active in the practice called the Claret-Cup in Los Angeles, US. Donatella Cusma is an Italian architect practicing in Los Angeles since many years. Ms. Cusma is a co-founder of this Claret-Cup, as I just said, a multidisciplinary collaborative project combining architecture, installation, and product design, as well as photographing, stitching, teaching, cooking, and curating. That's amazing. She is the US representative, board member of the Research Institute for Experimental Architecture, and adjunct faculty member of Woodbury University School of Architecture. Donatella Cusma is also a member of the Italian Board of Architects, the Messina chapter, since 2004. Please welcome Donatella Cusma to the stage. So, please.
Hello, thank you for having me. And thank you, Alessandro and Sandy, for such an inspiring, where are you, presentation. Last night we were at dinner and Sandy said how she never finishes her wine, so she's a good buddy to go out with. Well, I hope I could share my slot with you so I can keep listening to such a riveting presentation. So definitely get the book. So, like Jasper said, I am a member of Claret-Cup, one of the co-founders. My partner, Boya, is in LA, hopefully listening to this. And our practice is based part on participatory mapping projects and part on a more kind of, so to speak, more conventional architectural practice. Our mapping projects are what really informs our practice in terms of giving us a privileged point of view to understand how citizens relate to policies. So Boya and I, my partner Boya and I, are part of the widespread population of migrants who elected Los Angeles as their city. And at the beginning of our collaboration, we started mapping the city as a way to understand the physical boundaries of it, the geography of it. But as we more and more practice mapping in participatory events with public, we realized that there is so much more than geographical information to a map. There are traits that are more intimate and pertain to the personal experience of people in LA, especially by the fact that Los Angeles is a city of migrants. For this project, we were invited in the Armory Center for the Arts in Pasadena, and the project aimed at trying to give a tangible representation of intangible aspects of how people experience the city. So at the beginning of our 6 weeks residency in the gallery, we hung this map of the Los Angeles basin, unfinished, on the wall of the gallery. And then we conducted a series of events, and each one of them provided the content for the next one. This first one was a potluck in which we asked people to contribute their food that linked their history of coming to LA, some artifacts such as photographs or objects, and the story. And Boya and I collected these artifacts and the stories, and we basically, with them, physically stuffed these custom-made piñatas. I don't know if you guys know what a piñata is in Sweden, but we stuffed these piñatas that we designed with colors of a Los Angeles sunset. And after the smashing of the piñatas, which was also a public held event in the gallery, we asked the public to annotate our unfinished map, and specifically to also trace on the map their path to Los Angeles, where their favorite place, where they collected their memories. And so they annotated They added notes, and they used this kind of symbolic keys of the city to hang them in places that were meaningful to them. And the result was this kind of very textured, three-dimensional map that tried to express what the geography of the place doesn't express, which is the history of everyone. And the conversation that we conducted at the dinner table had a lot to do with integration into a new culture, into political conflict or cultural conflict of migrants coming to Los Angeles and having to integrate themselves in the city. One of the conversations was, for instance, about the drought. At the time of this project, Los Angeles was declaring a state of permanent drought. And so looking back at these maps during the years, we also find ourselves looking at the transformation of the city or the transformation of the discourse. And in fact, this year, Los Angeles, thanks to the coordinated effort of the citizens who employed water preservation measures and nature that gifted us with several inches of rain, we were declared officially out of the drought just a few months ago. Frogtown is the nickname by which the locals that live in a certain neighborhood of Los Angeles along the Los Angeles River called their neighborhood. And this project was basically a way to engage the public in conversation about the city. This is a neighborhood that was considered at the time in transition, a place where mainly inhabited by a community of Hispanic and Asian descent, and with an economy based mainly on manufacturers, local manufacturers. So the idea was to have this kind of table game of chances in which a simplified map of the zoning of the neighborhood was on the table, and we asked locals and visitors of Art Walk, in which this event was hosted, to play and to share the knowledge of the neighborhood, but also their vision for the zoning of the neighborhood or not, or their ideas of not developing it. There were 8 players at the time, and what happened is that we learned a lot from this experience. The knowledge of the neighborhood was shared. Dispute arose, and we get a picture of how what was the sense or the dissent about the neighborhood. The graphic of the zoning map also served us to create these screen-printed cloths that we produce in limited edition and give one for each winner or every tournament of the game. And again, looking back at these maps, since the neighborhood has been heavily gentrified, we basically capture a moment in the history of this neighborhood that no longer exists in that configuration. That same neighborhood served us as a site for another project from Frogtown with Love, which was a postcard mailing event. So Boy and I walked in the neighborhood and went to investigate about these manufacturers and makers in the neighborhood, that they were basically operating almost in anonymity in these warehouses in the neighborhood. And we were fortunate enough to be able to document some of the areas of production before they got pushed out by the gentrification of the neighborhood. This, for instance, was an aero engine company that used to test their planes under the bridge by the Los Angeles River. So as a part of the collective memory of the place, there is the sound of the engines being tested outdoors. And they're now gone. They were there from the 20s. And the space of their warehouse is now a live-work loft for creative businesses, or for artists. There was also a pickle company. A family migrated from Germany in the 30s, bringing with them their original recipe for their special pickles. And we basically documented their production, and we talked to them about what brought them to LA, how did they start their factory, and what was important to them. They're also gone since then. There is a restaurant in place of their of their warehouse. We again post-produced pictures into graphics, screen-printed a series of postcards, and distributed them at a public event, asking people to annotate them and to mail them. And again, that represent kind of frozen moment in time of this neighborhood that is now, for better or for worse, one of the most coveted neighborhoods in East Los Angeles. This next project, Signals from Mission 26, memorializes the last mission of the Endeavour space shuttle. The Endeavour, basically, after 25 missions in space, got retired and traveled, piggybacking on a modified 747 plane from NASA from Florida to Los Angeles International Airport. And before landing into Los Angeles and then being basically transported to the museum, where now is in a permanent exhibition, it took a ride and pictures with the most famous landmarks. In fact, if you come to LA, the picture with the Hollywood sign is absolutely mandatory. Once it got to LA, it traveled to town. And this is a map that was released by the Los Angeles Police Department to let people know where they could actually go and see the shuttle being transported. And if you're familiar with LA, you'll notice that the route is across the most unprivileged neighborhood of the city, who at the time were already plagued by the financial crisis. So we went around and we traced the 12 miles of this route by photographing and mapping it. And the space shuttle traveled some 123 million miles in its career, and these were the last 12 miles. So it was important for us to map them. What we saw is that the city was actually trying to accommodate the passage of this massive object that was, I think, 25 meters long wingspan and weighed over 86 tons. So the city had to kind of get ready for it to go by the city. So they removed light poles, signage, they installed cameras and security. They had to actually reinforce the asphalt with this massive curtain steel plates to support the weight of the orbiter. And so all in a sudden, these neighbors that were already kind of plagued by the financial crisis, imagine property boarded up, just kind of desperation in a way. All in a sudden, they were for a day, for 3 days actually, of the passage of the shuttle, they were in the privileged spot to observe this kind of historic event. This is how the city conceived of it. And some of them were very enthusiastic, such as the owner of this donut shop. Others were outraged, because in these neighborhoods that were already impoverished, and so they're not recovered completely from the financial crisis. They never were. They had to witness the cutting of 400 trees to let the shuttle go by. Some some buildings that were completely neglected for a day lived up to their names. This is the Colosseum, and our car at the time, a Volvo, this is for your benefits in Sweden, in which we traveled to take the photographs of the different places. Again, we processed the photos into screens, and then we screen printed a series of postcards. And then we plopped ourselves along the route, and we waited for the space shuttle to arrive. It was traveling at 4 miles an hour. And we asked people in the meantime to annotate our postcards and to mail them to whoever they want. Some of them were addressed to the city, some addressed to friends or families, and to memorialize this event in the city. And then we asked them to mail them in our bicycle-mounted mailbox replica. And then we basically waited long hours until the shuttle finally made it to our destination. And then we put the stamps, and we mail the postcards that travel to several different countries in the world. This is a project for which, still in our kind of mapping part of the practice, but with a commission, this time for the Red Cat, which is art center, Center for the Arts in downtown Los Angeles. For their fundraising, annual fundraising, we were commissioned to design the environment for the gala. And in this occasion, we created a map in which the red cat was placed in the map as this kind of generator and catalyzer of culture. There actually are among the most experimental art center in town. They also hosted your exhibition, I remember. And so we kind of extracted some keywords from their plays and the brief of their presentations to create a map, a cultural map of Los Angeles. So we conceive of them as these generators of culture. The map was processed, printed onto these large modules that were then folded and rigged to the theater flying bars, and then lifted above the main area in the theater and illuminated with the help of the theater technicians to create the environment for this dinner. The tables of the donors, of the people who came to that gala, basically by buying a table, they were supporting the cultural institution. So we thought to remove all the seats from the theater and to put the tables in the center of the theater to kind of promote this idea that they were supporting the cultural institution and allowing it to be and to promote culture. With the same attitude, we created this the graphic for the case studies Eames chairs in collaboration with Modernica, which is the original manufacturer of this chair since the times of Ray and Charles Eames, in support of the Los Angeles Forum, which is an institution that promotes research in the field of architecture and urban design in Los Angeles. And these chairs were auctioned for their annual fundraising. Switching gears a little bit, this is a map that we did not design. And it's the type of map that we wish it didn't exist. It is a map that it is actually a screenshot from an interactive map that you can find online by a group that is called Understand Homelessness. And with every yellow dot, they represent 5 people that are currently without permanent shelter in the United States. And if you did some research, you would know that there is a direct relationship between housing and affordability and homelessness. And in Los Angeles, this phenomenon is particularly severe. As of now, we have about 57,000 people without permanent shelter in the city of Los Angeles alone. So there is a lot of debate, obviously, about this problem. And the city has a series of measures that are aimed to help solving this problem, to provide housing. So if you listen to the American news, you're going to hear a lot about housing shortage. So as a way to front that problem, the city passed and adopted this ADU ordinance. ADU stands for Accessory Dwelling Unit, and basically means that anybody with a residential lot can actually add another unit to their lot, which was not doable before. The ADU can be detached from the original house, it can be attached to it, or it can even be, as of the most recent amendment of the ordinance, it can be a space within the original house, as long as it has a private access, a kitchen, and a bathroom. And in some circumstances, which is huge in LA because it's a car society, basically. With some circumstances, you can convert the garage, give up basically the parking if you are half a mile from public transfer, and convert that garage into ADU. In some other circumstances, you actually have to have more space on the lot, like in the second diagram from the left, to add more parking. So we first heard of this ordinance by the lovely couple in the picture who were our clients at the time. By the time we started the project, the ADU ordinance was not into effect yet. So they have a classical Los Angeles story. They're a young couple, they're trying to start up, and they try to qualify for a property that can actually afford. And in Los Angeles, you basically have to place a bid. You have to make an offer for a property. If you want to rent, you have to write a nice letter of introduction saying what is your vision for the property. You have to have good credits and all. and all that. So they basically searched for a long time, and finally they qualified, they scored a property that it was basically burnt into a fire 16 years prior. This is what they found. And they were very excited about it. And so we went to the site, and we also became very excited. We thought we found signs, clear signs on the site that we could deliver them their dream home that they wanted. So we started the process. What they bought were 3 lots. And one of them had the house that was burned 16 years prior and the garage that was also semi-destroyed. Before hiring us, they went to the city. They asked about this property. They wanted to make sure that they had all their ducks in a line before making this big purchase of their life. And they were told that these 3 lots could be tied together because, as you can see, the garage kind of straddled on the property line of one of the 3 parcels. And this tying the lots together was going to be a quite inexpensive and not too long process. So they went for it. They bought the property. And then we came on board, and we started doing the feasibility studies and kind of uncovering the issues that they actually had with the property. And the first thing was that the title company made a mistake. And one of the parcels, the one that has the access from the street, it wasn't included in the sales, actually. It wasn't theirs. So we had to regroup and try to figure out what to do. At that time, the ADU ordinance actually came into place. There was another problem, sorry. The problem was that because the portion of the house that now doesn't have access to the street, and that's not legal. And so what they had to do, we learned from the city, was this kind of complicated and costly process that is called parcel map permit. That was going to cost them 20% of the budget and take over a year. So they couldn't afford it. They were already paying for the mortgage. They were paying rent somewhere else. So what they decided to do was to just convert only the garage, which was the only building that has a couple of walls standing up, and just live there for a year until they could sell the property to somebody else. The reason why I'm talking about this project is because at the time we went to the city and we asked for a temporary solution, something that we could do at interim to give this couple the ability of do their projects, taking advantage of the loan from the bank, and then once they were settled and maybe rent one of the units out, they could actually pay for the other process, the more administrative project permit. That was the one that was more expensive, but we were denied that. So they proceeded with converting the garage with the help of a contractor, and they lived in a converted garage of 38 square feet for a year with a burnt house in the back before selling the property with somebody with more money that could basically afford to develop the property per code. The next project is a proper project of ADU. The clients came with us with a list of parameters that matched exactly what the ADU ordinance dictates. They wanted no more than 120 square meters. They wanted to add to this garage and demolish actually this garage and build the ADU. But basically, if you can believe it, because the property is in an historically protected neighborhood under the HPOZ, which is the Historic Preservation Overlay Zone, this garage in LA is considered a historically contributing structure. So we couldn't do anything to it until we got approval from the Historic Preservation Board. So this is what the diagram of the property looks like. So there is a single-family residence in historic preservation zone. And the house and the garage, like I said, were considered historically significant buildings. So we took the process in 2 steps. First step, we asked permission to the HPOZ to relocate the garage, which basically means demolishing and rebuilding it. But we couldn't call it that, because you can't demolish a culturally significant piece. So we rebuild it. And this is all virtual because it's only in the plans. It doesn't mean anything, it's still there. But in the plans, we show it relocated, keeping the architectural detailing of it, so which basically is the tile at the top of the roof, and then converting it into ADU and then add to it. So this is how we were able to take advantage of the ordinance to build what our clients wanted. Right now, we're still in design, and we'll keep pushing for our clients' vision. This next project was actually in an empty lot. Is uphill, very steep lot. For this project also we wanted to use the ADU ordinance, but at the time we couldn't because there were two problems with this property. First, the city of Los Angeles at the time was in this like chicken and egg type of situation. If you don't have a house on the property, you can't build an accessory to it. So they wouldn't let us design them at the same time. So we had to settle for designing a whole house. So this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to have the garage at the bottom, the accessory dwelling unit in the middle, and then up the hill, the single-family residence. But we couldn't do it at the time with the ordinance as it was written at the time. And so we settled for designing a whole residence, so it was just one. And then 5 months after we submitted for a building permit, the ordinance changed. And now they allow you to build the accessory dwelling unit and the house at the same time. So the diagram on the right is the vision for the future in which we are going to have to apply for another permit once we are done with the current one. And the permit is, the project is actually in plan check right now. And these are some images from the project. And the last project is actually a different project. The lot is a R2, which gives you by right the opportunity to build 2 full units on the lot. And so there was a pre-existing mid-century home on the lot with just 1 parking spot, which was what in the 60s was considered acceptable by the code. And we were entitled to, the lot is entitled to have a full second unit in the back, but there were 2 problems with that. One was we couldn't add any more parking on the lot without demolishing portion of the existing house. And also to have a full second unit, you need per code a 10-foot passage, and that also was in the way of our existing mid-century building, so we couldn't do it. And so in this case, we decided to adopt the ADU ordinance to help us come out from this conundrum. And so even though with the ADU you can build much less square feet, only 120 square meters, we decided to do that because it allowed us to not having to provide any more parking, so we were able to preserve the original structure as it was. And after 9 months, we are almost coming out of plan check after we comply with all the clearances, all the plan check corrections, and paid all the fees. And what we learned from this experience is what the ADU ordinance is designed to help people build a rental unit that could help them actually pay for their mortgage, at the same time providing more housing stock for Los Angeles that desperately needs it, is a tool that is still quite rigid and doesn't allow for temporary solutions. It doesn't allow for a fix-it ticket. And so while we keep working to help our client fulfill their aspiration, we hope that as architects we could be of service to the city, as we are the ones who apply the code on the field and understand the shortcomings of it. Because really, the ordinance is designed with only a few typologies of lots, but then when you are in the field, you understand that there are several different combinations on how the code applies. So if you apply for an ADU project today, you pay the exact same fees, and the process takes just as long as any other residential project. So while it is definitely a step in the right direction to densify the city, provide the additional housing stock, and also help people holding on to their properties, because in United States it's actually really difficult to be able to afford their mortgage. The whole society, the way it's organized, it demands people to have actually a lot of cash in hand. And during the financial crisis, a lot of people lost their home because they couldn't afford their mortgages. So it is a real problem. But as architects, we basically are confronted with the reality of the code being a very rigid tool that is not accommodating for all the different nuances of how a project is actually conducted. So what we are hoping for is for a more open conversation with the city, and for the code to become a real dynamic tool to allow people to fulfill their aspiration and being able to hold on to their houses. And this is the last slide. Thank you for listening, and thanks to my partner in Los Angeles, Boya, who helped me put together this presentation and most of all contributed to the work that we showed. Thank you.